Not yet, not yet. Yeah, but it usually show you already on, but indeed it was like still there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think
Now
we
I
are
see
here
it.
now.
Now I see it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just give me 1 second. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Academy of Astrology live stream podcast number 7. Today is our lucky 7 episode. Okay, and today we have Marcus and Sue with us. Sue, you have something to say? I remember you say you want to say something before we start.
Well, maybe just to say that I can't stay very long tonight. I'm very sorry, but
Oh,
I'm going to stay for a while and have a little bit of a chat. Just recapping for people that were not here last week or people who would like a recap anyway about Mercury retrograde. I've got a few things I want to say. Not Mercury retrograde. Sorry, I'll start with lunar eclipse. The current lunar, so it just happened 2 days ago, so it's very recent.
yes.
Just
I
want
think
to bring it up
it's
again.
pretty important. It's pretty important about the eclipse. So okay, let's recap a little bit. Sue, should I put the chart on?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. If you have it, that's great. Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to remind everyone, this chart is based on London, okay?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Look at it. It's connected to Jupiter. Isn't that great? What a nice combination. Okay. Let me just go through it again, just very briefly for those of you that are not sure. Okay, so lunar eclipse is obviously it's the culmination of the moon's cycle. It's the very top of the cycle. And eclipses only happen about once every 6 months. So they don't happen more often than that. The rest of the time, the sun opposite moon is just a full moon. I mean, it's still pretty, but it's a full moon. Yeah. Okay. Well, many people find, especially people who are particularly watery. So those that are Cancer or Scorpio, or what are all the other through two.
Pisces. Pisces.
Yeah. Pisces. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pisces and Scorpio and Pisces and Cancer. That's the other one. Yeah, sorry. Those of you that have those planets quite strong in your charts, then you may resonate more to the full moon or to the eclipse, especially than others. So not everybody's going to absolutely feel it, although it's very nice to look at. It's very interesting to watch the moon going orange. It's very strange the way it changes, right? This particular one was running across the Gemini Sagittarius axis, as you can see. So there's obviously fiery energy in there as well. Okay. So it happened on Wednesday. If you have a full moon, especially one that's falling on one of your planets or somewhere really important in your chart, like your ascendant or something, then it's probably going to affect you quite a bit. And it tends to represent some kind of culmination of your experience, whatever your particular life is about. So it may be a sort of some kind of result or an outcome of some sort, some kind of achievement that you've actually gone. Some of you've gone to a peak or something like that. It can even represent letting go, sort of a letting go of a situation. So it's like something comes to a peak and you let it go. Right? It may not be letting go. It depends what the situation is for you. And that's essentially what the lunar eclipse means. So something like that is coming together in your life. It might be achieving something. It might be just letting go. So it's just like it's like releasing. Okay.
Can I add one key word to this, Sue? Because this eclipse has done a number on me this week. It's squaring my midheaven, which is 3 Virgo, and Saturn is also stationing squaring my ascendant. So I've had a week of mini hell, actually. The key word that I think of with eclipses is disruption. It's always disruption. And I totally agree with everything else you're saying about the letting go, because the moon's on the south node and Jupiter being involved, it may involve some good things ultimately.
Yeah.
But I think eclipses, the way that they differ from full and new moons to me is there's always some disruptive element that comes with them, like because one of the lights gets shut off temporarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I can speak a bit about that later on, what happened.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's particularly interesting, Marcus, because actually it connects strongly to Jupiter by T-square, and I have a T-square that strongly involves Jupiter, and I didn't really notice it.
Right.
It doesn't resonate with any other planets on my chart.
Got it.
So not every single person on the universe is actually going to experience it.
No.
Some will far more than others, like Marcus, this time anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any comments before
I think, Sue, when you mentioned about this lunar eclipse connected to your Jupiter, is your Jupiter in your natal chart, right?
Well, it doesn't connect to Jupiter. It's just
but this in this chart also, in this chart, Sun and Moon also T-square Jupiter, and Jupiter is the ruler of the Moon in this chart.
Yeah.
So it's kind of pretty interesting. So this means this chart has a kind of a, in one side is like kind of a Jupiterian flavor there. Maybe some people be a little bit over optimistic. Could be,
That is also true. My Jupiter's right at the other end of the sign for me. It's nowhere near in terms of degrees. So that's why
I do think though, Sue, your positive sort of spin on it is not unwarranted. I mean, the fact that Jupiter rules it and is so strong, I would think that the eventual there's a lot more hope for a good resolution or an amicable or beneficial outcome from this, I think, because of the Jupiter rulership.
Yeah.
But obviously it's in square to the Sun and the Moon, and it's still an eclipse, and it's happening in the same week that Saturn is stationing retro.
Oh yes.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. I think this week, since last week, we started mentioning about this week is quite busy week for astrology, because we have eclipse, and then we have like a Mercury stationary retrograde, and Saturn first, Saturn stationary retrograde, and the Mercury is going to retrograde from tomorrow, right? From tomorrow evening. From tomorrow evening. So maybe we should talk about it, because it's also quite important. This Mercury is also the I think a ruler of the Gemini. The Sun is here now, and also is ruler of this solar eclipse, coming solar eclipse. Yeah, so I think this Mercury play an important role at this moment. Is a stationary at this moment. So Sue, could you give us some idea?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I see it's also in Gemini. That's my sun sign. Yeah, that's right. It is indeed, and it's like I mean, generally speaking, we've spoken about Mercury retrograde once before. We just recap this as well slightly. Mercury retrograde tends to result in all sorts of things to do with communications, transport, teaching or education. All of those kinds of areas seem to be affected. There are other areas as well, but those are big ones. And it's like when Mercury retrogrades, so things seem to not quite go as smoothly as perhaps you would prefer that they did, right? So things like people experience all sorts of things, but for example, you might find that you have a problem with your public transport around the time of the eclipse, or a problem with your own vehicle, maybe it might even be an accident. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just a disruption. It's a disruption, and it's a holding back. This is being experienced by Mercury when it's in its retrograde phase. So it may be, on public transport, like the bus or something. It might be that you lose your pen. Anything that's connected with stationery or communication or travel, all of those areas, and probably there are other areas I haven't thought of, that will be affected by Mercury retrograde. And people do actually sort of, curse and swear about Mercury retrograde, but sometimes it can be very difficult to deal with. It can also lead you into a certain amount of confusion where you're not always necessarily that sure about what's really going on, right? So that's when Mercury's retrograde, and it's going to be retrograde for about 10 or more days, actually. I haven't counted the days, but
yes, it will retrograde from
19 days, I think.
Yes, it retrograde from tomorrow, 29th of May, until the 21st of June.
Yeah, that's a long time. Best
Yeah,
part of
long
the
time.
month.
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite a long time. So it's like you can say to yourself, well, how often is this going to happen? Because I can't have this disruption, for this length of time somewhere in the year. Well, sorry, but it could be, it happens at least 3 times a year, very occasionally 4 times a year. And it's retrograde for that long. So it's actually quite a long time. So you have to try and find a way to kind of, you can't avoid signing contracts or traveling or buying stationery, or communicating with your group of workers, or having to give a speech in front of sort of 200 people.
There's a couple of things just I want to say. I mean, it's obviously things we've spoken about before, I think, but one is not every Mercury retrograde is going to treat everyone equally, because it will fall differently in their chart. So there's that, obviously, some people will be hit more by one than others. Yep. And 2, I think they're useful for timing, and they're just something to bear in mind. So I always think when Mercury is about to go retrograde and I've just started some sort of communications exchange about, particularly, as you say, Sue, about some contract or about some exchange of emails or contracts or some financial arrangement or some travel organization that I book the ticket or I send the email about the insurance or whatever it is, just as Mercury's about to go retrograde, you can damn well bet that process is going to take, there's going to be some complication or something that will be back and forth, and will only get fully resolved when Mercury goes direct again. And you could look at that and go, oh, bloody hell, I'm just not going to do it. But as you say, that's not practical. And actually, you can look at it as like, these things happen, and it just signals the times when you do have to go back over things and correct mistakes, and it's just showing when that happens, I think.
Yeah, and double check as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Sue, but I think when we talk about Mercury retrograde, this is mean that during the transiting at this moment, Mercury is going to retrograde at this moment. But maybe our friend on the YouTube may be curious about, what if they have the Mercury retrograde in their natal chart? What does that mean, Mercury retrograde in the natal chart?
That's a good question. So those of you that have got Mercury retrograde, you'll see the little R next to Mercury in your birth chart, right? Okay. I have a bit of authority to speak about it because I was born in Mercury retrograde.
Oh.
And it's very interesting. What you can do is, because it's represented by each day is like a year of time, so it's a long time. So you could go back and count the days after you're born. If you look at an ephemeris and count the days after you're born, you can see how long it stayed retrograde, because at a certain point would have turned direct again, right? Okay. And I counted up mine, and it stayed retrograde until I was 19.
Oh.
A long time. My entire schooling days. Okay. And it's so interesting when I look back at this older age now, looking back in reflection to have a look at it, what I see is that in some ways you could say, I mean, I don't see it negatively anymore, but you could say that it cast a bit of a shadow over my youth, in a sense, because I ended up being clever and being sent to a very academic school, right? Okay. And I spent most of my time at that school struggling, because I was with people that were really super brilliant. We're all going to go to Oxford and Cambridge, and I didn't, right, anyway. And I found with Mercury retrograde, probably other things in my chart too, but that was one of them, was showed that I had to struggle to some extent to keep up the high level that was set at that school. There was a lot of pressure put on people to perform incredibly well. And it wasn't until I came out of it. It's so funny, because when I came out of it, as I left school at 19, it marked a huge turning point for me, as it does for a lot of people at that age. I left home, I got a place of my own, not just a room, you understand. And I went to art college, and it's so interesting because I didn't want to do anything intellectual or academic. I went and did art instead, completely different, right? And that was like that. It was almost like Mercury sort of released me, because the other thing is, for me, and it may have happened for other people this length of time as well, it's coincided with my first nodal return, which is about the age of 8.5, 19, right, at the same time. So it was massive, the big shift. So actually, when Mercury goes, don't despair if you've got Mercury retrograde, because at a certain point your Mercury went retrograde. If you go back to an ephemeris for the date of your birth and count the days since you were born and when it went, and see when Mercury turns retrograde, then you can see how old you were when that happened. Being your teenage years, or it will depend. It might be much earlier.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. That's a great tip.
I think Sue, the technique you mentioned is secondary progression, right? Is related to secondary progression. I think we should find the time to talk about it. It's very, very interesting technique. I love it very much.
And very simple in a way, isn't
it? Yes, indeed. Yeah, we should talk about it. It's not difficult at all, I think.
No, it's really, you can work it out by hand, sort of.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah, thank you, Sue. So I think most people will have question about like if I have Mercury retrograde in my chart, what does that mean? Does Mercury not function? No, it's not really in that way. It's not that simple. And also it kind of, usually I know people with Mercury born in Mercury retrograde, they are more kind of cautious.
Yeah.
They are more cautious with things, and they are more like they are more reserved and hold back. Usually, that is not really like immediately going to spread things out or spread message out. When they receive message, they think again. They rethink, think and rethink, and then until they say, "Yeah, maybe we can talk about that." I think this is what I find the people born with Mercury retrograde is quite cute.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, I think
but it's funny because you have to kind of sort of, you feel like you have to learn how to think. You don't have to learn how to think. It's just that sometimes your thoughts don't come quite as rapidly as they might later on in your life.
Yeah.
Right? You have to sort of get the wording straight.
It makes sense because a retrograde planet traditionally, while there can sometimes be a sense of malfunction with them at times because they're going the wrong way, yada yada, symbolically, they also represent things that you have to do over, or they go backwards. So in a like really specific event chart or a horary or something, they might literally represent somebody going the wrong way. But in a birth chart, it is interesting that the planets, that the things that they symbolize do seem to be, as you say, Rod, introverted more. And they also seem to be something that the person struggles with more. They have to work much harder on because that planet is going backwards and slower before it turns direct. It's kind of like you have to redo and go over. And what your description of that, Sue, was fascinating. Just in that, as a child, it wasn't that you were stupid. It was the opposite. You were actually sent to a school for brainy kids. So it's not that the planet is essentially damaged or weak. It's just that you have to work so much harder with that planet, and it sort of gets turned inwards because you're kind of like having to deal with all this extra internal pressure associated with that planet. That, you know, so that's
really, really true, because it's led me into certain situations in my school life where I was actually eventually, banned from taking any more maths at the age of 14.
Oh wow!
Wow. I couldn't do it. Well, I couldn't do it. Actually.
Well, as an arty child, I'd say, oh well.
Yeah. So okay, but consider about that. In the technical term, about today, like a Mercury at this moment is not really retrograde yet, and we consider it as a stationary. Could we have a little bit of like an explanation about between the two, Marcus?
Okay, sure. So a planet, obviously stationary, as the name implies, it means when you look at it in the sky, it appears to be standing still. And there was a key difference traditionally between when a planet was stationary retrograde, as Mercury is now, it looks like it's just sitting in the same degree before it goes backwards, and stationary direct. And the traditional astrologers used to say a planet that's stationary retrograde is like a weak man getting sick or a weak man running. It's like it's like the planet is slowing down and running out of breath, and it's about to get sick. It's about to, keel over. Whereas a planet that's stationary direct is like somebody about to turn the corner and get well again. Now, obviously, that's an extreme example. It doesn't mean if you have a planet retrograde doing anything that you're going to get sick, but it does often mean that some complications are about to be introduced when that planet is stationary. And it sort of, it puts a different spin on it. If it's stationary direct, it's usually what that represents is about to start moving forward. If it's stationary retro, it's about to start going back over. But it really depends on the context. So if you are about to embark on a project that involves revising or digging back into the past or going back over some old papers or that kind of thing, then great. It just describes that, you know? So but the station, I don't know. That's my little thoughts on stationary.
Sue, how about it?
Okay, I need to leave now, Rod.
Okay,
sorry.
okay. I thought you were going to talk about something.
It's a short appearance. I'll be around much more.
Yeah. Okay. See ya.
I love your background, by the way, Sue, and love
Yeah.
to see you.
I'll see you again.
Yeah.
See you again.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.
Now,
Bye.
yeah. I think yes. When we talk about the stationary and the retrograde, I like to make it different because it's myself in my chart. I have the Saturn. I have a Saturn, and then if I don't check the ephemeris, I have no idea my Saturn was stationary.
Right.
Rather than do nothing.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point, Rod. Yeah. Unless you check in the ephemeris, you don't always know.
Yeah, I know that one way in the modern astrology, or may say the psychological astrology, station is more about focus on something. You have your focus totally on that planet. So it's like if I have natal Saturn stationary, I totally focus on Saturn theme about the rule, authority, and and maybe the house ruler by Saturn. But the Mercury stationary is such a short period.
It is, but I think that's a real, because I've got Mercury, as I was saying before, my Mercury in my birth chart is stationary retrograde.
Okay.
So perfect. So it's it's definitely not perfect functionally, but for our topics today, it's perfect.
Yes.
So as you know, Rod, I've written one book, and that book took me 14 years to produce.
I think yes.
I mean, it's my Mercury's trine Saturn and sextile Jupiter, so it's a big book, and I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah.
But it took me so long.
You know what? That's why. Yeah. That's why when we say, "Oh, we're going to work together for one book," I was like, "I'm so relaxed. It will take a long time."
It'll get done though. It'll get done.
We will. Yes, we will.
Yeah. But it's that stationing does seem to literally put things on pause for a long time.
So. Yes.
And because I think, as you said, it's like that the focus, I like the idea of focusing on that planet because it's unnaturally holding in the same position. And again, it depends on context. If it's in a chart representing, say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it. It depends on the context, whatever it represents, because it might represent somebody who is not going to change their mind if it's a very slow planet like Saturn.
Yeah.
And it's but usually a planet that's stationing retrograde is about to change their mind.
Yes,
so
it's about, yes.
But I think if you've got it in your stationary in your birth chart, firstly, it may indicate that whatever that planet represents may take you longer to produce than other people. And secondly, just check whether it's stationing retro or stationing direct. Because if it's stationing retro, then it's kind of like you're definitely going to be taking longer than others to produce that thing. And there's going to be some of what Sue was talking about there with sort of spending maybe the first few years of your life really working on that thing and feeling a bit burdened by it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, we know on last Sunday, the Saturn starts retrograde at the 13th degree Aquarius. So what does that mean? And how our audience should be, apply in their life about Saturn retrograde?
Oh, I mean, well, it depends really, because in one sense, because this happens again once a year, it really depends if Saturn is hitting anything in your chart. But just generically, because Saturn rules boundaries and limits, so things like borders, and so borders between countries, for example, things like immigration.
Yes.
It rules laws and restrictions and limitations. Now, when any planet goes backwards, remember that one of the key words, because I always think of reversion, delay, malfunction, or that kind of thing. The borders start to become leaky. So in terms of, for example, the current world situation with the pandemic, we may see more travel. However, it's not that the restrictions have been lifted. It's just that in places they may become temporarily lifted. They're temporarily more leaky, perhaps more traveling going on. But then it's definitely, the key word here is temporary, because Saturn is still there, strong in Aquarius. It's just going retro for a bit.
Indeed.
And because it's an air sign, I'm thinking social. It's so things like social distancing and the control of socializing is going to become the restrictions on that are going to become a bit looser for a while. But there may also be a sort of I don't know, an introversion of those sort of fears. It's not like they've gone anywhere. They just sort of disappear.
I quite like the idea, another view about the, especially we say the outer planet retrograde. I still remember one of our tutors, Sue Tompkins. She said, it's not big difference, because all these planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, they all spend 1/3 of the time.
1/3 of the year.
Once of the year in retrograde, so it's not big deal. How you see that?
I think she's right. I mean, in general, however, it does make a difference in that, for example, as you know, I'm a medical astrologer. So whenever I see, say, Saturn going through somebody's 8th house in their birth chart, and the 8th house represents death and taxes and whatever, but it also represents the bowel. And what I've consistently seen is when I see medical charts with Saturn in the 8th, it's very often that the person is constipated or they can't poo properly, because Saturn blocks things up. But here's why: it's when Saturn is retrograde in the 8th, the person has often diarrhea. It's the opposite problem, because the control that is missing. Right? It's malfunctioning. So in fact, they are still probably retaining a lot of wastes and things that they don't need to be retaining. But if Saturn direct has all the boundaries and the borders functioning in the normal way, it blocks things up. Whereas Saturn retrograde opens things up, but not necessarily in a healthy way. You know what I mean?
Yes. So yes, it's very interesting that we're talking about the planet retrograde and the planet stationary, especially for the beginner. This is two things. They are different, and then I think most people understand the concept about retrograde, but they really don't know about the stationary. And I would suggest if you look in your chart and go to check on ephemeris, go to check the chart. You have any planet stationary? Because that would be interesting, because that would be one main focus in your life. Like Marcus is a Mercury stationary retrograde, and I have the Saturn stationary retrograde too.
Interesting.
So that's the things we focus about. Maybe it's not totally good thing or bad thing, but it brings some meaning, and you can work on it.
You spend a lot longer working with the things represented by that planet.
Yes, indeed.
That's the take home, isn't it?
That's why today I will play the Saturn rule, even it's just like 27 past, but we only have 3 minutes, because today we're going to end it on time. Because I'm quite like to play Saturn. I enjoy play that role. Yes. So that's very quick. I will introduce, because I just mentioned about Sue Tompkins. Next month on the 26th of June, Sue will give AOA UK a lecture about mundane astrology, a crash course. So if you're wondering what is mundane astrology and how mundane astrology working on the forecasting or prediction. Anyway, forecasting the world event, economic event. Please join us for Sue's class. She's an amazing astrologer, and I adore her, and we adore her.
She is great. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she is great. And about the next week, I would suggest maybe next week we will trace at least a little bit about solar eclipse, because next week, I think on Friday is the 4th of June, and then we have the solar eclipse on 10th of June. So we're going to talk about solar eclipse for 2 weeks, a little bit. But
Yes,
just trace a little bit, and the one exam again, go to bring backward to see what we can see with this solar eclipse. And again, please, we have received a lot of comment and nice feedback. We're really, really happy. And so please leave our comment. And if you have any question, leave your question on the comment area. And please subscribe our YouTube and visit our website.
Brilliant. Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye.